Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. And if you're new here, welcome for the first time. And today, what we're going to do is we're going back to my top 100 books of all time. And today, it's number 30 to 21. That's part 8 in the series. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, so got quite a varied selection of different kinds of books here. As usual, it's been the same every single week, except for this week there might be a few books that might raise the eyebrows. Some of the books that I'm going to mention are kind of polarizing. Some of you might think, how the hell do you like this book so much? But remember, this is not a greatest books of all time list. It's just not, you're not going to find this in Times magazine or anywhere else. This is my personal list. These are my personal favorites, books that have touched me through my life and my reading life. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, before we carry on, just a reminder of the rules. There's only 2 books per author, and there is, if it's a series, I'm going to mention the whole series or just one book from that series. And I just want to let you know that for this particular video, I've broken one of my own rules, and I'm okay with that. And you'll see why when I get to that particular point. Let's carry on. Okay, in 30th position we have The Sunbird by Wilbur Smith. Now, out of the 20, 30, 40 books I've read by this author, this is my favorite. It's just a wonderful, exciting archaeological adventure, kind of in the vein of like Indiana Jones, but the best you can imagine. And it's about the discovery of a lost civilization and a lost city in southern Africa. And it's these 2 men who basically seek out this lost civilization. And of course there's a woman between them with like a love triangle. And this happens in all of Wilbur Smith's books. There's sex, there's love, there's woman. Beautiful. But anyway, in the first half of the book is the discovery of this civilization, this lost world. In the second half of the book is where it really shines, where you get transported back in time to this place and to this. It is just absolutely beautiful storytelling, and I couldn't put it down. And yeah, if you enjoy a good adventure thriller and you want something a bit different, try out Wilbur Smith. That's number 30. Okay, in 29th position we have Northern Lights. And this is by Philip Pullman. I don't have a copy anymore, I'm really upset about that. And yes, this is a YA story, a YA fantasy series. But believe me, it is a YA fantasy series that is very, very, very suitable for adults. In fact, there's a lot of very adult themes. But on a very surface level, it's about a young girl called Lyra. She's 11 years old, she's our protagonist, and she is freaking awesome. She's kind of a all over the place. She's a bit of a, what do you call it, a rebel. She kind of fights everyone. She's just a really spunky character. I really enjoy her. And yeah, she has to find out where these boys are being stolen and where they're being taken. And she goes out to find her friend. And on a surface level, it's about these demons. And it's like your soul is an animal on the outside. And as a child, your demon, it's like it's your soul. You cannot part with this creature. And they basically, as a child, these demons are all over the place. So they flicker, they change form, just like a child, until you get to adulthood, where you settle down, and it settles down into the kind of person that you are, whether it's a monkey, whether it's a wolf, whether it's a tiger, whatever it is. And of course there's also polar bears, armoured polar bears, and battles, and all sorts of wonderful things. But that's just on the surface. When you go below, it's actually, you're looking at religion, you're looking at spirituality, you're looking at the whole idea of people in charge, and there's all sorts of adult things happening. And there's a lot of controversy about this book, especially with the Catholic Church. But there's just so many things about this book that are just so fascinating. The world building is fantastic, and it's very unique and original. And I also just love the fact that it gets very, very dark in places where you kind of squirm. And I must admit, the second book, which is called The Something Knife, can't remember, not as good as the first book, but it's still a great series and well worth picking up. And so yeah, that series is called His Dark Materials. Okay, the next one is going to raise some eyebrows, and it's the kind of book that you either love or you hate, and that is Shantam. I think it's by Gregory David Roberts, or David Gregory Roberts, I'm not sure, and it's supposed to be kind of semi-autobiographical, and it's about this Australian convict who escapes prison in Australia, and he finds himself in Bombay, India, and it's about the adventures and experiences that he has there. And for me, when I read it, and I read it as a young man, a long time ago, for me it was just absolutely magical. Beautiful language, although when you go on Goodreads now, you see most of the people that complain about it say that the language is infantile and purple prose, but at the time I really enjoyed it. And it gets quite dark, horrific, his experiences in an Indian jail. It also gets incredibly adventurous, and it gets kind of poignant and beautiful. He falls in love, and so it's all his experiences is in India, and he works in a slum, and he joins the army, so he has all these, and of course, yeah, it's not going to be for everyone. And I have a feeling that if I go back to the book and start reading it again, I might cringe a bit at how much I've enjoyed it. But as I said at the beginning of this series, these are books that have basically impacted me on my life at different times. And when I did read this book, it was beautiful and gorgeous. And in fact, it's got, I think, 4.23 ratings on Goodreads, so it is a beloved book. So all those people that give nasty kind of comments on Goodreads, yeah, you know what I'd say to that. Okay, in 27th position, and unlike Shantam that comes in at over 900 pages, this little horror novella comes in at just over 100 pages, and it packs quite a punch. And that is A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck. Now, I read this book last year, and it haunted me for days after I finished reading it. It was just mind-boggling. And it is about this normal man, and I'm sorry if I'm out of breath. I feel like I've got a bit of a cold, bit of flu coming on. But hey, doing the best I can. But anyway, yeah, this book is about a normal man, and he's a Mormon, and he dies, and he expects that he's going to go to heaven and be reunited with his family. Instead, he finds himself in a crazy hell. A large, and when I say large, I mean just an epically large, infinitely large library, where there's a huge, not just a huge amount of books, but an infinite amount of books, because it's mirrored on another library, where any possible combination of lettering and any book that could ever have been written is in this library. And all he has to do to get out is find the story of his life. Sounds simple, right? This book is mind-boggling. And yeah, it's better to go in a bit blind. I did do a review of it last year, but it's like being hit by a hammer. At the end of the story, that's a little bit like how I felt. And it is terrifying, it is haunting, and it is incredibly thought-provoking. It makes you think about existence and about mortality, immortality, all of these things. Do yourself a favor, and that's A Short Stay in Hell. And in 26th position we got Dracula by Bram Stoker. Now, I don't really need to go through the plot with this one, do I? I'm sure you all know the story, and I think you also know, if you've watched my channel, that I'm not really into gothic literature, but this classic vampire tale is obviously an exception. I love the movies, I love this particular story, even though it's written like a series of letters. It's written as journal entries. I think it's called epistolary. I hope I'm not messing it up. But it's wonderful. Wonderful characters, wonderful storyline, and I love the characters. And in particular, I think if I really have to think about it, my favorite is Renfield. He's just such a bizarre, twisted character, and of course Dracula himself. And I love the beginning of the story when Jonathan Harker is travelling to Transylvania to meet with the Count, and just a description of the countryside and how it changes and the people, and that's actually very, very interesting. But yeah, it's just a horror classic, and if you love horror, you need to read this book. That is Dracula. And in number 25, we've got The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Now this is a YA horror fantasy book, but it deserves to be read by all adult people as well. It's just phenomenally beautifully written, imaginative, and at the beginning it sort of starts off with quite a bang. Quite a disturbing start where an entire family is murdered, and a little toddler nobody owns manages to crawl away to a graveyard. Okay, bit of suspension of disbelief, people, and he gets taken in by the graveyard folk, and he gets protected and brought up as one of their own and taught the rules of the graveyard. And it is just so imaginative and wonderful. And there are thrills and spills. There are times of real terror. There's a section with these ghouls. I really enjoyed it. And there's also this man that is constantly trying to find this child because he's got unfinished business. So it's just a truly wonderful tale. And I love Neil Gaiman, and I'll be doing a video of him very soon. Okay, and in 24th position, this is a book that I raved about last year and I couldn't stop talking about, and that is Skullface Boy by Chad Lutzke. Now this is just horror with heart. It's a warm, wonderful coming-of-age adventure about a boy, Levi, who's 16, who's got a skull for a face, and he's a bit of an outcast, well, kind of, obviously, and he discovers that across America, on the California coast, there is another just like him with a skull for a face. So he sets across America on a road trip. The empty backpack, I think he's just got a book, which is great, no money, and yeah, he meets all these weird and wonderful creatures. The whole thing is kind of David Lynchian, off kilter. All the characters he meets, the adventures he has along the way are just strange, just like he is. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful horror story, like I say, with heart, and it has had so many lessons and interesting things about being a human being, what it means to be different, and how we should embrace our differences, what it means to be an outsider, an outcast. It's just a stunning story, and I highly, highly recommend it. So that is Skullface Boy by Chad Lutzke. Okay, in 23rd position, we're going to have my third favorite fantasy epic of all time, and you're going to all be very, very surprised and shocked. Maybe not all of you, because this is something different. And this is Stephen Donaldson, First Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. And this ain't Lord of the Rings, people. And I think this is also one of those books that you either love or you hate. And the main reason for doing so is because of the protagonist, Thomas Covenant, who is probably one of the most unlikable protagonists. He's an arsehole, self-centered. He's an absolute prick. Excuse my language, but he is. And yet you are with him on this journey. So how could you possibly want to even go on this journey? He's a leper. He complains all the time because he gets thrown into this world, this beautiful world. But because he's trained as a leper to look after himself, he cannot believe that this world exists. He refuses to believe that this world exists. But this world believes in him and believes that he needs to be a savior for them. And the moment he's in the world, from the very beginning of the story, the first book, he commits a terrible crime, where I reckon most people throw the book across the room and don't pick it up again. But I encourage you to persist with this hateful character, this unlikable character, because he does go on a kind of arc of redemption. And more than that, the book is kind of incredible. The more you read and you get into the second and third book, it is fantastic. The fantasy is awesome, the characters are awesome, there's some incredible creatures and so on. But it is a lot darker, it is a lot grittier than Tolkien and any other of those classic fantasy books. It's hard reading and you actually have to pay attention. So yeah, I would highly recommend it, but it's not an easy read. And that is Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. Okay, in 22nd position, remember how I said I was going to cheat? Well, I'm going to cheat right now, because I'm including The Long Walk by Richard Bachman. Let's just pretend that I didn't know that that was an alias for Stephen King. Let's just pretend it's by Richard Bachman, okay? So we got The Long Walk. And what is The Long Walk? In a dystopian future, you've got these kids, 16-year-olds, who join a competition, a yearly competition, where they have to walk. And the winner gets anything they want for the rest of their lives. The rules? You walk. There's no finish line. All 100 of you. And you've got to maintain the pace of 4 miles per hour. If you go below that pace, you get 1, 2, 3. You get 3 warnings, and then you're out of the game permanently. You are shot dead. And the last one standing, or rather walking, wins. Absolutely brutal, horrifying, and yet it's almost completely character driven. You focus in on these boys and their dreams and aspirations and the relationships that they have with each other, and it's harrowing, it's horrifying, but just so interesting. And even more interesting is that this is the first book that Stephen King wrote in his freshman year that was published after Carrie, but he wrote it before Carrie in his freshman year. So that's pretty interesting. Richard Bachman, I mean. Okay, in 21st position, we got The Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. Now I just have to say that one of the things that might have influenced this book being so high up on my list is, if I think back to my teaching years, this is the best book that I ever taught. And I taught it to a grade 11 class, and I loved it, and they loved it. I don't think I've ever had a class that's been more sort of engaging with me, with this book, exploring the themes, exploring the characters of this dysfunctional family down south. And they're kind of they got a hidden past, they got a dark past, and it kind of goes from the past to the present and back again. Now I just want to read the first paragraph of the book to finish off, because the writing for me is absolutely beautiful. My wound is geography. It is also my anchorage, my port of call. I grew up slowly beside the tides and marshes of Connaughton. My arms were tawny and strong from working long days on the shrimp boat in the blazing South Carolina heat. Because I was a wingo, I worked as soon as I could walk. I would pick a blue crab clean when I was 5. I killed my first deer by the age of 7, and at 9 was regularly putting meat on my family's table. I was born and raised on a Carolina sea island, and I carried the sunshine of the low country inked in dark gold on my back and shoulders. I'm sorry, I could carry on. The prose of this man, of Pat Conroy, is absolutely stunning, and I'm just going to say that you might see a second Pat Conroy book in my top 20. Okay everyone, so next week we are coming to my top 20. But let me know what you thought about those choices. I know some of you might think, wow, I didn't think you would choose that book. But hey, it's my choice. Let me know if you read any of those. I'd love to hear from you, but keep it civil down in the dark comment spaces down below. And until next time, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.